a creative, you can get more and more senior and your job gets less and less creative. And I struggled with that. I wanted to be writing. I didn't want to be in meetings all the time. Connections have played probably the key part in my career, because without them, I don't know how much work I'd have. All of my work so far has come through someone I know or word of mouth.
Hello and welcome to Creativity for Sale podcast, a show to help you start and grow your life-changing creative career and business. My name is Radim Malinic and creativity changed my life. You see, I believe creativity can change your life too. I even wrote a book about it and it inspired this podcast. I've set out to interview the world's most brilliant creatives, designers, writers, musicians, makers and marketeers about their life-changing experiences with creativity. If you ever wanted to know how people go from their humble beginnings to the pinnacle of their success, our conversation should provide you with an intimate look into triumphs, challenges and untold stories behind their creative endeavors. We also discuss the highs and lows of creative careers and creative life. So, thank you for joining me on this exploration of passion, creativity, innovation and the boundless potential within us all. Let creativity change your life. Are you ready? Today's guest is one of the most sought-after tone of voice talent, working with the ever-expanding roster of clients of the biggest names in the film, streaming and entertainment industry. Her recent launches, brand relaunches and campaigns include work for Spotify, Netflix, IMAX and Sony Music. She's a true devotee to the copywriter's craft and copywriting community. It's my pleasure to introduce Vikki Ross. Hi Vikki. Welcome to Creativity for Sale podcast. It's my great pleasure to have you on. I'm excited to speak to you about you and your career and actually have a chance to speak to you properly, because it's been a while since we've known about each other, we followed each other's work, and now finally we get to speak. So I want to start with a question that will potentially take you back a few years. Do you remember the first piece of paid work that you produced?
Well, I don't remember the specific piece of work, but I remember the project, and it was I was working on the launch of Now TV at Sky, which is now called Now. I had been working at Sky for 2 years and I reluctantly handed in my notice because as a creative, you can get more and more senior and your job gets less and less creative. And I struggled with that. I wanted to be writing. I didn't want to be in meetings all the time. So that's why I reluctantly handed in my notice. But I got really lucky because, as the story goes with most freelancers, Sky became my first client. They asked if I could basically carry on working with them, but on my terms. And it was at the time that they were working on bringing out Now TV. So I probably did that for about a month in the Now TV brand team, worked on the tone of voice and all the key messaging and the launch comms.
Wow. Now TV. Yeah. I mean, there should be some conversations about their UI. It's just their app is never interesting.
I know.
This is a questionable thing, but they've got good programming, so that's why people stick to it.
It's true. I mean, it's like Netflix, all of the apps actually. I've worked on loads of the TV apps and none of them are easy to use or enjoyable to use, but they've got the programs or the films, so they get away with it.
It's a bit like a syndrome. So you mentioned tone of voice and entertainment. How did you actually get into both of these things? Because did you have a plan? Was it targeted that you wanted to work in entertainment and tone of voice? Or how did that come about?
I should probably tell you now that I have never had a plan for anything. It's all just happened. But how I got into it, well, coincidentally, my first ever job as a copywriter was in a tiny direct marketing agency that wrote reader offers in the national press for the entertainment industry. So one of the first things I wrote was a reader offer for Titanic, the movie, on video. So that's going back a long time. But then after that, I ended up in beauty for 8 years, and I thought I'd never leave beauty because, as to be stereotypical, as a woman working on lotions and potions, it was, something that I really loved. But I love TV more. And after 8 years, this was at the Body Shop. So after 8 years at the Body Shop, I thought I need to do something completely different just for my sanity. And I went to Virgin Media. And while I was at Virgin Media, I got approached for the head of copy job at Sky. So that's how I ended up in entertainment. And that was about 14 years ago. And I've been working mostly with entertainment brands ever since because I just love it. Like, it just doesn't feel like work to be sent TV series scripts so that I can write a promo, or to go, well, you know, a while ago now and pre-COVID, but to go to premieres and screenings and things like that. Like, what a job. So I have managed to stay within entertainment because, I guess, firstly, because I've worked with so many people across Sky, it's so huge that I've kept those connections, and they've typically gone on to more entertainment brands and taken me with them. But also because in more recent years, I've probably held out for more entertainment industry jobs rather than taking any job, which is what I did when I first went freelance, because like a lot of freelancers without a plan, I panicked and thought I would never get any work. So I did anything that was offered to me.
There's three things that I picked up on that. There's a no plan, which we all we can all relate to. Doing polls when I was writing my books, like, has anyone had a plan? No. And it's even pointless to actually ask people to have a business plan, because how do you write one? What does it entail? And it all falls apart as soon as you open your front doors. You're like, I want to write copy. Let's say I want to write copy for the beauty industry, and you see someone at that situation says, actually, can you write something for cars? Like, I can write, or I can design, and you just get swayed. And I think it was Max from Ragged Edge who once said that the decision that you make today will take you 10 years to undo. It's like, it was literally like you make a plan, and just like yourself, I can I can absolutely own up to the fact that I had zero plan. I went with whatever was gonna pay my cheap rent at the time, and somehow ended up here. And even with the knowledge that we now have, you keep the things that are good, but you don't necessarily plan for the next ones, if that makes sense. You don't necessarily think, oh, I've got a plan to have a superstar career, let's say, in entertainment. Like, that doesn't always happen. So you mentioned connections, and I'm a big believer in meaningful connections, because we can be throwing the spaghetti in the social media. And how would you say that the connections actually played an integral part in your work? Do they multiply? Do you get recommendations? How do you get to work on new work?
Connections have played probably the key part in my career, because without them, I don't know how much work I'd have. All of my work so far has come through someone I know or word of mouth. And I've got really lucky that if someone I've worked with is moving on to a new job, they've taken me with them for their brand project. So I didn't answer part of your question before about how I got into tone of voice, but we can come back to that. Or they've told somebody else about me, and it's always been a recommendation. So sorry, I'm being a bit vague here, but I mean, I can't, all I can say is connections are really important. I think people who start out freelancing before they, as their job, as their career move from the beginning, perhaps could struggle without having that address book that they've built up over time. I mean, I'd been working for various companies for 16 years, I think it was, before I went freelance. And without that experience, but also the connections I've made over that time, I don't know how I would have got anywhere. I don't know how I would have started. I think it's difficult to just start from nothing and rely on recruiters to find you work.
That's an interesting point of connections and starting from nothing, because when you think about it, even if you start in an employment, you still start at the bottom of the ladder if you choose to climb the ladder. And I mean, I've started as a fresh, naive freelancer with no connections and no idea, no philosophy, no clients initially. And I had to go back into employment for a few years just to absorb the right information, because to build something out of nothing, you really have to have kind of like a magic formula that is so unique that people go, right, we want you. But that's like one out of thousands, not even a million.
Totally. You're a brave man going out doing it from the off on your own.
I was a stupid man.
Oh, stupid, yeah.
But I was definitely fascinated with what I could do, because I At that time, I used to live in a place called Southampton. I came to England as a music producer, as a journalist, music journalist. I was all about music and music covers. I mean, and flyers, posters, and all of that stuff was something that appealed to me, what I wanted to do. And I found myself amongst the people who were freelance designers. I was like, what's this freelance stuff? How can you do this? And because it all of a sudden felt, the freedom was the four-letter word in freelance was for me like the massive part, because I came from a background where I was always doing something. I was always busy. I literally finished my higher education and decided to go to England just to have for a laugh, have a fun, just to buy some records. And I've been here for 24 years now. But it feels daunting with starting now, because we live in such a Disneyland of creative worlds that where do you start? Who do you speak to? What do you do? And I think we've got lots of sort of preconceptions what people might be thinking, what they need to do. But what I wanted to talk to you about, what you do excellently, like I've seen nobody else, is actually look after your community. You help people, you repost jobs, you nominate people for work. This is something that is almost unheard of in a design world, a creative world. You get like the exceptions, but everyone, as you said, everyone feels anxious when they start. Like everyone tries to be protective of their patch. And what do? Like, there's work, go and get it, just go for it. And how did that come about? That must have come from a place where you feel comfortable, because everyone would be hanging on every job thinking, we're going to do this. We're going to get someone else to do this for us. So did it come naturally to you? Like, how do you do it? And where do you find the time?
I guess there's a number of reasons why I do it. I started off supporting other copywriters by creating a hashtag called Copywriters Unite on social media. And that was because after years of experience, I just got fed up with feeling like copywriters are not looked after in the studios or in creative departments or, wherever they're working. There either isn't a copywriter at all, and that's a whole issue of its own, where everyone else thinks that they can write copy and they don't need to hire a specialist to do it, or the copywriter is working on their own and has no support, or they work in a creative environment where the boss, so the ECD, let's say, is from an art background, not a copy background, or there's no head of copy, or whatever the reason. I just found that copywriters are often left out in the cold. And so the social media hashtag has connected copywriters around the world. And I guess from then on, I just evolved it, not consciously, just genuinely. I love my job, and I want anyone else that wants a job like this to be able to get one. So if I see something, I'll share it. I think it's really exciting to see what's out there. There is a narrative that some freelancers will protect their clients from others, would be scared to pass work on in case they don't get it back. I guess I've always been really lucky that I've had so much work that why wouldn't I share it? Also, if I can't do a job with a client, I don't want them to be stuck or to go with someone and it won't work out. I want to recommend someone to them. So I just don't think about it. It's second nature. Why wouldn't we help others? Where do I find the time is another question. Look, I spend a lot of time on social media because I do love my job and I love everyone in the industry. I'm so excited by everything that we all do that I can't get enough of it. But often when I'm scrolling, I'm telling myself I really should just go and read a book.
I mean, it's exceptional what you do, especially I've seen your hashtag. I follow your Christmas bingo and Easter bingo and all of that stuff. I think what you've created, unknowingly, you've created your own personal brand of thinking, because I can see you live and breathe. I mean, there's only a few other examples of people I know who live and breathe so presently what they do. And so I love that. There's a new campaign. I saw the Uber campaign yesterday on the platform, and you were posting about it today. And I kind of hear through you, and I've spent literally a few minutes a day on social media because I don't have much more time. But through you, I can see, this is what's happening in the world of copywriting. It kind of gives me an idea of what to do. So exceptional work that you do, and please don't stop, because it's amazing to see that you're so generous with your time and wanting to help other people. And you're like a catalyst of knowing, because sometimes I see something And I'm like, is this any good? And then I see you posting about it 3 hours later. It's like, it's rubbish.
Well, I like to share ads because, like I said, like I'm so excited by what we all do. I know what goes into writing a line and getting it on a billboard and having it out there. And like, I want to celebrate that. I want everyone else to see what copy can do in the work. And I guess that feeds into respecting copywriters and valuing them and employing them to do the job.
How does one go from, I know you were in a young age, you were inspired by magazines and you started doing writing. How do you get to tone of voice? I mean, and that's one question. And how do you get people to understand that they need a tone of voice?
How did I get to tone of voice? I think it was probably the biggest education of it for me was probably when I went to Virgin Media, because they have such a strong brand personality and distinctive assets. That's where I really understood the value of it, and also how important it is for it to be consistent in everything, even right down to, I remember there, instead of saying terms and conditions on their website, they said the legal stuff. And then when I went to Sky, I copied it and called our terms and conditions there the legal bit. So that's where I first sort of really learned about it. And then I went to Sky as head of copy in the brand team at a time where they were rebranding and they wanted a new tone of voice. So I worked with design and branding agency Venture 3 on all of that. And I think it was just something that came really naturally to me to find a way for a brand to speak, and also to be able to write guidance on what that looks like for other people to execute. And I guess, like they say, the rest is history, because I now specialize in branding and tone of voice in the entertainment industry mostly. So this year I've been working with IMAX and ITV and ITV Studios. And every time I do something different, I think some people think there's a template, but each brand is unique. So every voice should be unique and every process of creating it should be unique. And like at school, I was always really good at the stuff that I liked. And I really like having the responsibility and the honor of creating a voice for a brand.
That's amazing. Do you find how much of a battle is it to establish a tone of voice? Because obviously I come from a branding background, and sometimes it's what people don't know is when you show them, like, okay, you know what? You can actually be this, where your ceiling is, we can raise it twice as high, or we can do this, or we can just, being curious and being sort of ambitious, you can always find something different. But how much of a battle is it to give the right tone of voice? That's question number one. And how much of a battle is it actually to get people to follow your tone of voice guidelines? Because again, knowing from branding and creative work, people like to invent lots of stuff because they're a good creative job. So yeah, both sides, how does it work?
Yeah, I guess a lot of people do think that branding is a nice to have and we'll do it if we've got a bit of time and money, but that's obviously not the right approach. In answer to your first question, again, I'm lucky. I work with people who come to me because they value branding and tone of voice, so they want me to do it. So it's not a battle if they've come to me asking me to do something. But making sure that they then execute it consistently over time can be difficult, because there are people, you'll often be in a meeting where someone will say, oh, we don't need our tone of voice for this bit. You need your tone of voice in everything. I always say your tone of voice is as important as your logo, and you put your logo on everything. So why wouldn't you use your tone of voice in everything? We recognize brands because of what they look and sound and feel like. And if you take one of those elements away, then you lose that recognition and familiarity with customers and even fans. I really like when people find their job easy. So I try to make everything easy. I don't have any formal training in any of this. I didn't go to university. I didn't go to ad school. I didn't study anything. So everything that comes from me, I think, is just like on the level of a normal human being. I'm not saying, I'm not, whatever, we can get into identity crisis later. But I talk to people like we're talking now. I explain things in, I guess, normal everyday terms rather than marketing jargon. And I think that helps. And I think that my guidance is just always easy to follow because of that. In terms of ongoing consistency of the execution. I typically have really good relationships with my clients, so I don't feel like I can't sort of 6 months down the line get back in touch and say, I saw a social post that went out and it's not quite on brand. Here's what I would have done. And they're always really appreciative of that, because sometimes they've just lost their way, forgotten, got caught up in a moment and just needed a little reminder. But equally, I do that when it's good as well. Like I will get in touch and say, I've saw this and I love how you've implemented the tone of voice. And they're always, again, really appreciative, like, glad you noticed. And they then pass that on to the rest of the team involved. And then that gives everyone motivation to keep going because they're doing the right thing.
Extra brownie points when you look out for your clients. And that's exciting to see that you do that, because it's easy to give clients guidelines, in our case visual guidelines, and 6 months down the line it's like, what happened?
Well, I've got that at the moment. Actually, I worked on the launch of ITVX last year. It was an intense job writing the tone of voice guidelines, not just for ITVX, but updating the tone of voice guidelines for every other brand within the ITV family at the same time. And then a couple of times this week I've been out and I've seen ads for ITVX, and I really like them. They're great. They're really fun and they're eye-catching. They're massively off-brand. But this was exactly a year ago that I worked on the guidelines. So anything could have happened between now and then. They could have new guidelines and I'd just be really interested to see them. That's the other thing. I'm really nosy. I think that's what keeps me going in my job. I want to know what everyone's doing and I want to be involved.
So if you could, for example, talk about, let's say, the example of ITVX, because you mentioned it was an intense job and it must have been lots of people involved in it. How long does it take from you being approached to actually seeing the work done? How much time is there involved? Because sometimes it's ready, steady, go mental, and usually you get as much time as you get given. But to do great work and to actually, to get the right research, interviews and that kind of stuff, how long does it take?
Like any answer to a question about creativity, it depends. Typically, a brand project doesn't, like if it's a rebrand, it doesn't always need to be done to a time. It's just something that the company are working on in the background. So we could be working together for 6 months to a year. Other times, like with ITVX, they could be going to launch in 3 weeks and they don't have the resource internally to write the guidelines. So they come to me and say, quick, let's go. And I mean, I worked for 3 weeks, 7 days a week, late nights, was really ill afterwards, if I'm honest, and got the job done. But it was an intense process.
I mean, if I was to tell you that you got 3 weeks to rewrite guidelines, tone of voice guidelines, in a normal mind, you would say, no, like, I need more time. We need to do this. But however, we just do it to ourselves. We just go, okay, well, of course, I will say yes, even though all the red flags, all the red lines are flashing, and you're like, I will still do it. So I should probably...
It's slightly unfair if I don't say this. They already had the principles, so I didn't have to do the setup and the research and the back and forth on, getting us somewhere. So they did come to me with a starting point. So I was able to pick up from there. But no, you're absolutely right. That is no way to work. It's no way to respect a brand and do a job that would do the brand justice. But circumstances, often are different. And in that moment, I could do it. I wanted to do it. I did it.
Yeah, I think it's more of we've all worked on projects that were massively rushed and needed to be rushed. And I just sometimes wonder why they have to be so rushed, because I have been, luckily in my career, I have been an illustrator in advertising for about 10 years. And I worked with the clients through agents and through agencies and representation and stuff. And as soon as I literally cut off everyone and just decided I'm going to do this on my own properly, regardless of clients and projects, I got to work, again, in a similar story like yours. I got to work for the clients. I used to work through agents, which sometimes was a bit naughty to do that. But all of a sudden, there's no rush. You get paid on time. Thinking, well, of course, there's the paper chain is longer. There's more people involved. Something gets lost, And I always see, like, with people that you speak to on a daily basis, you can still misunderstand one another. It's just there's so much in communication that they can do that.
Right, what you said just before at the start of what you just said about there's no need to rush. Typically, or why are we rushed? Like typically, yeah, why are we rushed? Like when a client will come to me and say, we've got an ad going out this afternoon and we haven't cracked the line, what can you do? I'm like, you probably got briefed on this like 3 months ago. You booked the space. You've known for however long about this ad. Why are you coming to me with an afternoon to spare? That's just insane.
I mean, yeah, you're right. I mean, it's not as a surprise.
Yeah. Like, oh no, an advert's coming.
I remember, I mean, this is, I think I went on some of the most, what do you call it, like a bucket list projects in my life. And they were usually done in like 5 minutes. Oh, we've got a space for Earth Hour on a Hammersmith flyover, but literally we need the output in 10 minutes. We've just been given a space. I'm like, okay, it's just, you want to get lost. I think this is the whole idea of my second book of Mindful Creative. It's just like how to actually make that space and time with your work, like how to do things and enjoy them, because most of them are just done in such a rush. Because when you think about it, the marketing got so fragmented that we're no longer producing a print ad or TV ad. It's just like, it's all of these little spaces that all need sort of attention, and I guess it's all fragmented as possible as it is, really. So
yeah, but also we can all do it. I think that's why it happens. Like we can do it, but then send your work off having sweated over it because you've got no time to do it, but you've got to do it. Go to bed, wake up the next day, come up with something so much better, but it's too late. Like creativity needs time. I guess restraints can bring great ideas, but time can bring more. So we should allow for that.
I think there's something in our brain and our pathways that we just need that time to actually sink that in, just to have it in. Because I don't know if you ever tried to play the guitar or learn a new language or count in different language. You can beat yourself so much just to try to learn it in one day. No, go to bed, sleep on it. Your brain's going to do the admin, you know. This is the place where people come from, neurological chat.
Well, sorry to talk about another book when we've barely mentioned your brilliant books. I've read all of them, as you know, but I read Rick Rubin's The Creative Act, A Way of Being earlier this year. And he said something like, we're a different person from one day to the next. So what we create on one day, we could have done completely different the next day. And I think that's just so true. Whatever you thought was a good idea when you first did it, you have different eyes, you have a different mind the next time you go back to it.
I mean, that book is amazing. I love the book. I was expecting something different from the book. And then I realized when I read it, that's the book he was definitely going to write. Because to a naked eye of not a creative person, it would be like, what are you on about? Like, is this obvious or is this not obvious? I like his quote about that sometimes what you create, your mind is not there. Like you haven't reached that self. And I have made so many creative decisions, especially in my own sort of publishing work, that I'm making those decisions because I might like him in the future, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I published an orange cover book. I don't particularly like orange, but it's going to stand out. You know, it's going to have that impact factor. And one day I'll look at it and go, that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to make an orange book. But there's all these things that my books used to be done in the past, like within 3 months. I would write. I don't write every day. I would write that crazy sort of brain dump, go into design. I used to work with Emily Gosling, who'd edit, and by the time we were producing the books and publish, because I got my own publishing company, and always the deadline in my case would be children. Like children are getting born. So you have to make a book because the child is being born. So that was two cases of 2 books. And with these books, it was about kind of get to the right place. And I wanted to do a hard pivot from branding into writing and kind of, the publishing full time, which hasn't happened. You need time. I've been doing this for 8 years. And finally this year, through all of the escapades, it wasn't battles, but escapades with, myself, like trying to write 2 books at the same time with proper word count and, writing in a way that actually brings some value to people. It was overwhelming, but I needed extra days and weeks and months to actually get to the position where, okay, now the deadline is okay. And of course you can set yourself as much time as you want and it's still done, last minute because something fucks up, something just doesn't go right. And it always reminds me of taking kids to school, and we used to live next door to the school. And if the school started at 11, we still would be late. It's just that kind of thing. Like sometimes you try everything and only then you get into it. So I was always surprised in your case that I haven't seen you write a book yet.
I don't want to. I like the idea of having written one, but the process of writing one, I just can't imagine myself being so disciplined. I have been offered 2 book deals, which is obviously very nice. And I know some people wish that they could say that. But firstly, I don't have time, to your point about making time to write your books. I guess I don't have time because I don't want to find the time. I'm so busy doing my day job and loving writing copy. I don't want to give up any of that to write something I'm going to struggle with. Like, long copy is not my strength at all, and that's how I look at writing a book. I do have a number of ideas for a book, and one of them is to write basically in a paragraph at a time, breaking the idea down. I never say never, but at the moment I don't have a book in me. I've never had a book in me. I've never wanted to write a book. A couple of years ago, when I was offered the first book deal, I went away and thought about it, and I thought, well, I could be like Ernest Hemingway, and I could book myself 3 weeks in the Caribbean and go and just write something. And I told my husband, and he said, if you want to go to the Caribbean, just book a holiday to the Caribbean. What? Like, you don't want to write a book. You're trying to find ways to make it more appealing. So yeah, not yet.
I think that's the most fascinating answer so far. I mean, a person who's so cherished and celebrated for writing amazing copy doesn't want to write a book. Whereas in my case, I just wrote things and they just blossomed from there.
But that's it. You just wrote things because they were in you, that you had something that you wanted to get out. I don't have anything that I want to get out. Probably everything that I want to get out, I put on Twitter in like no more than 280 characters, as much as I can cope with.
I think that's plenty for a page. No, I think I will. Not that I want. Not that it's my life's mission to make you happen, but I think that there is book in you and will make you happen. But when you speak to people, a lot of people say, I would like to write a book. And in your case, I would like to have written a book, but I don't want to put myself through the process. And the idea of like, okay, I'm going to book a 3 weeks in Caribbean. You're not going to write a book in the Caribbean. You're going to have a good time in Caribbean. You're going to write a book at home, literally at 5 o'clock in the morning or 10 o'clock at night. Because I remember trying to write the Book of Ideas, Volume 1, and start on a holiday with my girlfriend, now my wife. We went to Cornwall or Devon or something like that. I was like, we arrived. I opened my laptop, like, I'm going to write here. She was like, I'm going to put the laptop through the back of your head. But honestly, like, what are you doing? Because I have been so overworked that there was no space. And I think with the writing, the medium of book is so exciting. Like, literally, it's so prehistoric in a way. And we still we will always go and gravitate towards it. But people say, I want to write a book, but I don't know what about. Or is that, I think sometimes we see the gratitude or like the gratification actually before the work. And I always say, like, if it's in there, it just comes up, it comes through. Like all of these things that I'm putting together, they're just experiences. Like there's everything that I've come across, and I make daily notes, and I try to be a bit curious. And I think it's about not giving a shit what you're writing in the first place, because I think, we'll talk about it in a second, it's that sort of prejudging yourself of when you're writing, like, am I writing this? Will people like it? And what would happen there? So with your work, with a tone of voice especially, when you're creating more or less a persona, how they speak and how they sort of verbalize and communicate, do you ever think about the feedback, what's going to come back from customers, passerbyers, public, all of that stuff? How does it work?
Well, it's difficult to answer because the public doesn't see the tone of voice guidelines, but obviously they see what comes as a result of implementing those guidelines. And I think it's really important to pay attention to the public, what they're thinking, what they're talking about, what they want. And often for some creatives, there's maybe a bit of vanity in their work and they aren't considerate of the public, whereas I'm very mindful of them because they're the only ones that matter. In the world that I work in particular, in the entertainment industry, we think that people don't pay attention to brands, but people particularly love TV programs or football teams or films. And I take that responsibility on to do what they love justice. So much so that I think as freelancers, we have a reputation for taking any job going, but I will turn down work that I don't think I could do well at because it wouldn't be fair on the end audience. So I was asked to work on the launch of the Warner Brothers Harry Potter studios when they were opening, but I'd never read a Harry Potter book or watched a Harry Potter film. And I know that people love Harry Potter. And I thought that is not for me to try and wing it. That's not fair to them. So yeah, I guess in answer to your question, they're the most important part of the job.
It takes a lot of experience and confidence to say no to Harry Potter. And I'm generally, all the other projects that you sometimes feel, but do you ever feel like the universe rewards you for actually making that decision? Because sometimes with projects that don't feel quite right, they seem to bring good stuff as a result, because you get this amazing golden carrot. You're like, take this. I'm like, no, I don't want this. And so all of a sudden things come up. So did you ever feel that you may have jeopardized your future or your career because you didn't take on something? Or do you feel it actually always worked out for the better?
I think what you say no to makes way for something that you're going to say yes to. In my first few years of freelancing, I think I mentioned before, I pretty much did everything that was offered to me because I didn't know when the next job was going to come. And in more recent years, I've got more confident at knowing that work does come. And if a job isn't right, it's okay to turn it down and just be patient. My husband did this recently and I didn't really get it at the time. So he is a freelance sound engineer for TV companies, or he was, and then COVID happened and he couldn't go into any studios. So all his work went, and he spent a lot of lockdown not working while I was busier than ever, because working for TV companies, everyone was at home watching TV. I had loads to do. So we were really fortunate. But I was looking at him like, are you gonna try and get any work or ask anyone if there's any work out there for you? And he said, this is my chance to do something different, which is what he wanted to do. And he was patient and he waited for about 18 months. I mean, he did have bits, but nothing really to talk to. And eventually the work that he wanted came his way. And I really admire that strength and patience that, I don't have that. So yeah, I think there's 18 months is a long time, but obviously he was reliant on me covering what was missing. Not everyone is in that situation. But yeah, patience pays off.
I admire his patience. I absolutely admire his patience. So actually wait for 18 months. The only person I've read about patience like that was Matthew McConaughey.
Oh, wow.
who didn't want to be a rom-com guy anymore, so he stopped working for 20 months.
Yes.
Said no to millions of dollars because he wanted to pivot, and he did it, and obviously he did it for better. And that sort of pivot, I think it's sometimes gut-wrenching because the life doesn't stop, the mortgage doesn't stop, and sometimes we feel like we've done the right choice by getting a house and doing things, but we always got this cognitive dissonance between should I have been eternal freelancer living on a shoestring, or should I actually do I need some sort of security and balance in my lives? And it's just like always look at someone else's sort of thing and say like, oh, is this better? Is that better? Is this should I have done this? So I admire that.
But I should say that our lifestyle also allowed him to be able to do that in a way too. So neither of us ever wanted children. And I've always said that had I wanted children, I don't think I could have handled the pressure of going freelance and wondering when I would next get paid, because you have a responsibility that is more than and bigger than yourself. And so I don't know that I could have handled that. So when it's just us two relying on each other, it's much easier, I would imagine.
I can imagine it is. I've seen it from this side, just two young children, and also to other external activities what we do as a family. But I think this is a difference because you definitely relate them, because you definitely refer to yourself as a freelancer. Whereas as you know from my book, I see things more as a small business. I feel like if you want to do something as a power of one, it's more about how do you sort of orient, like how do you sort of position yourself that you can actually have additional income streams, if that makes sense? Because I found with sort of freelance work, it wasn't for me. I couldn't work for other agencies for too long because I felt I was a bit too old. When I was like illustrator when I was 35, I spoke to 20-year-old art directors and I just couldn't handle it. I was like, I've done this a million times before and you're telling me to do it that way. I can't do this. I can't. So that was my drive for actually going on my own and just building a business rather like sort of more sort of something that can handle other things. Did you ever think of setting up tone of voice agencies, sort of getting more people on board and doing it that way? Or?
Yeah. So firstly, I have said freelancer throughout our conversation, and I've probably stopped officially using that term, I don't know, maybe 6 or 7 years ago, and called myself a consultant because of the way that I work. You're right. Being a freelancer and going into agencies is very different to being brought on as like a brand ally and consulting with your services. And yeah, I can tell you stories, like we could compare notes on being a freelancer in an agency and just being massively disrespected because of that word. There was one agency I worked in where I had to ask if I could go to the toilet because I didn't have a desk or a pass to get between doors, and I was sitting in reception on my laptop and it was just ridiculous. And I was thinking, yeah, this is not for me. Whereas consultant much better represents my level of experience and the relationships that I have directly with leadership teams in big companies around the world. I never came up with a way of promoting or positioning myself, I guess, which comes back to, you mentioned personal brand before. I don't have a personal brand. I'm just me. And I know personal brand means lots of different things to lots of different people, and some people like it. But when I see on social media people trying to work out what their personal brand is and then curate it and live up to it, it seems like so much work when, yeah, just be yourself. That's your personal brand. It's just you're your personal brand. In terms of setting up a business, so I am a business. I am a one-woman business on paper and in tax terms, I suppose. Setting up a company and recruiting other people has been suggested to me, I can't tell you how many times, especially with what you identified before, that I do like to help other people get work. Why wouldn't I set up an agency, a writing agency, and recruit others? Well, probably for a similar reason to the pressure I think I would find myself under if I had children. I have a terrible guilty conscience. I don't think I could handle the pressure of being responsible for other people's careers and earnings in a way that would be healthy for any of us. So as much as I would like to help people, I do it in the way that I do it rather than employing them. Also, I am so not business minded. Like, I can write really good copy. I cannot run a business or manage my time or look after other people, or like I can't even sit in meetings about the business, which is why I left full-time employment and went to work for myself in the first place.
Oh, it's fascinating. Going to the point of a personal brand, like I think there's a lot of wrestling with the reality that people do now, because we get to see outcomes of people's personal brands, but like David Beckham never decided to be David Beckham brand because he was born David Beckham, and everything else was kind of built for him, around him, with him wanting to be it. Whereas, as you said, it's naturally kind of growing into who you are and celebrating the sort of uniqueness, which feels often so hard to do. Like when someone says, just be unique, you don't have to blend in, you can be who you are. And if you tell it to someone who's 20 years old, they're like, yeah, can I be that person? Can I be that person? Can we borrow? Of course. At that time, we are sort of character chameleons. We try to sort of find our own unique voice, and it's much easier. But in your case, I mean, what you do is that's what people talk about when you're not in a room. And when I mentioned to someone that you're coming on my podcast, they're like, of course, we know Vikki Ross, like, because you're there. You're like, what you do is what you live and breathe. I think the name, the term consultant, I think gives you more authority, and I think that's quite important because, again, what the chicken and egg situation, like, do you want to present yourself as a consultant to a brand or to agency rather than actually having been in a position of actually knowing what consultant really needs to do? Because, yeah, I think that the terms of respect and how people sort of deal with freelancers and how things happen, I think you create yourself as a disposable, almost like a disposable personnel that can come in and do stuff and go. And yeah, I think that's not always healthy and that's not always quite right. Do you remember the day when you sort of wore the title copywriter for the first time? Do you remember when that day was and how did you feel?
Yeah, there were two moments. So the first was fleeting, I suppose. I was working in this tiny direct marketing agency that I mentioned. That was my first, so My first few jobs were as receptionists and office assistants. Oh, when I was an office assistant at this marketing agency and I realized they wrote reader offers, I asked if I could write one. And when I did, because it was direct marketing, they could measure the response and it did well. So they let me write more. So then I understood that I was a copywriter. But because that was my sort of first proper job out of college, because like I said, I didn't go to uni, after a couple of years, I then left and I went traveling around the world. And I came back a year and a half later and I couldn't get a job as a copywriter because I didn't know that you needed to know people. I didn't know that you should have gone to ad school or get a placement or an internship or a mentor. So no ad agency would take me. I didn't have a portfolio. No one knew any work I'd done because it was direct marketing, not advertising. So I got another job as a PA, and this was at the Body Shop, where eventually, so I'm trying to keep the story really short, but eventually I was moved into the creative studio working with art directors, and that was when I could then call myself a copywriter. And I felt like I'd sort of waited 5 years maybe to be able to call myself a copywriter and to write copy and to see copy go live, and it's thrilling. If it's something you've always wanted to do, whatever the job is, and then you get to do it, what an honor.
I think I always find it with the distance of time, when you reflect back on the time when you said, I'm a copywriter, to what you are now, which is obviously a tone of voice consultant. Sometimes you think, I wasn't really a copywriter, but I really wanted to write copy. And I remember I was a graphic designer before. I was definitely a graphic designer. I was like, but I remember how proud I was. Like, this was the most exciting thing ever. And I kind of made me to live and breathe what I was doing. And it was, I remember how thrilling that was.
Yeah, well, also, I think it's just for both of us, like they're really sexy jobs. So why wouldn't we be excited to be that thing?
Yeah, and I think it gives you sort of purpose and focus. Like, oh, that's what I'm doing now, even though, the journey kind of takes you on wherever twists and turns you decide to sort of take on. I think it wouldn't be a conversation about creativity if we didn't touch on the dreaded AI at the moment. How do you find it? And what do you think? Is it unformed sort of chaos, panic? Do people panic for no reason? Because in my opinion, I look at it and you can see the people who are winging it with AI, and you can see what AI can do right now. And it's a calculator on steroids. It's not necessarily the tool that will replace people, because I don't use it much. I had a look what it can do, and you ask it 5 different questions. It gives you the same templated answer. We're like, well, okay, we'll stop there, shall we? So I know that obviously everything new causes chaos. Like when Kindles came out, we thought it was the end of books. When internet came out, we thought it was the end of books. There was always meant to be end of something. It never was. It was only an addition. So I don't think you're worried about AI personally yourself. And is it something that people should look out for, and sort of how should they think about it? Because you don't worry about it. So for what reason why people shouldn't worry about it?
I don't worry about it because I'm not interested in it for a start. Like you, I've given it a go. I got bored very quickly. In loving my job, I want to do every part of it. And in outsourcing any of it, that just takes away the bit of my job that I like. So why would I do that? I don't think it could necessarily write tone of voice guidelines in a way that a non-copywriter could pick up and understand and know how to then write a piece of copy that is bang on brand. I just don't think it could provide that level of execution guidance. I know people will listen and they'll go, well, maybe not yet. Well, yeah, maybe not yet. But I think I'm not alone in enjoying the process and enjoying the people within the process. And so I think there will always be people that want to hire real people, real creatives, over using AI. And I think the people that want to use AI instead of a copywriter, understandably maybe looking to reduce budget, costs, because budgets are tight. We're in a funny, difficult time at the moment, but they're not going to get the best results. Maybe they don't know what the best results are though, and in which case we don't want to work for that person because they don't value true creativity in the first place. We could do a whole other episode on what I think of AI. I don't know where to stop, but I think, yes, it is worrying for a lot of people, and it's made more worrying by the fact that the media industry press are insistent on sharing articles about how AI is going to take a creative's job, which I think is insane and irresponsible, because in the time that we're in, with people struggling like they are, why are we not celebrating and supporting each other rather than using clickbait headlines just to get a story?
Unfortunately, it's about making people anxious. It's not creating a comfortable future. And I think that's the problem, because it's the news stuff, and we're still trying to find our feet with it. And yeah, I mean, if it was written from a point of compassion, it would be like, hey, maybe we can learn how to use all of this, because if you think about flying cars, like everyone's saying, we will have flying cars. People can't drive the cars on the road properly, let alone the one that could fly. So I mean, it's a crazy one. Where do you see the future of your work? Is it tone of voice till retirement, or what would you like? What is your side? Where's your curiosity likely to take you in the future?
Do you know, like I said right at the start, I never have a plan. I have thoughts. I don't have dreams necessarily. I guess my thoughts are, yes, probably tone of voice till I die, if I'm honest. I'm usually open to anything. I can't see myself not being a copywriter and doing something completely different. That's out of the question, I would say. But the career that I always thought I wanted, I never got. So maybe there's still the opportunity for that. And when I say that, the career I have by accident, I absolutely love. The career I thought I wanted was to be a copywriter in a advertising agency and work my way up and up to chief creative officer in a sexy agency, running a creative department and really bringing out work that heroed copy and, valuing the copywriters in the team. If that opportunity was presented to me one day, it would be a conversation I would be interested in. I say one day, I have had many conversations like that. Often agencies or brands that I really probably would be up for changing my life for, because it is a life change. Once you've been working like this for, I think it's, definitely 10 years, if not more, it's difficult to then say, yes, I will give all of this up, all of the pros that come with working for yourself, to go back into a studio day in, day out, working for others in that way. Yeah, I guess it depends on the conversation and the time that the conversation happens. There was a conversation I had with a huge brand last year that was really interesting, but not quite interesting enough.
Amazing. Yeah, I believe with what you said, 2 words, life-changing. I very much believe that creativity can change your life. And it can change your life even more if you are the one holding the steering wheel, if that makes sense. I think not having a plan, I think is just the exciting part of what can happen or what cannot happen. I mean, neither of us knew, what was going to be in the future of our work. Never thought, when I was most excited graphic design, I never thought that I would stop, spending all day, every day in Photoshop or in design. And it changes, literally, just the flow of curiosity and inspiration changes where we go. And I think it's the most exciting part. And I remember how much I wanted to put the words life-changing on the cover of the book. It's like, what does it say? It says, how to start and grow a life-changing career and business. And I think that sort of kick up the ass, or just sort of pep talk, like, hey, look, if you actually do something, you never know what might happen. Because I've done talks for these at universities and festivals so far. No one wants to be self-employed. Everyone wants to go straight into employment because, and that's the right decision, because you need to learn things from the bottom up. But it's the question of how good you want to be, what you want to do with your life, because it can take time. But in this hyper-processed world that we've got in our pockets with colorful pixels, you can kind of see how good you could be pretty quickly. It's just how much you want to go after it. So, yeah, I mean, it was a pleasure listening to you about your career, and I think we can have a few more conversations out of this quite easily, especially if you drill down on some of those topics a bit further. But yeah, what's for you in the future? What's the next thing that you're going to work on? What's the plan? Well, sorry, there's never a plan, is it?
Well, no, so that just a bit to one of the points you made just now. By not having a plan, you never know what's going to come, and everything that's always come for me has been more exciting than the last thing. So why have a plan when there's something's happening out there that's working out in the end anyway, for me at least. So yeah, no plan for the long-term future. The immediate future, I'm about to start a new brand project in the next week or so. I usually take January off, but I've been asked to work on another brand project in January that I absolutely can't say no to, and I'm so excited about. So yeah, a little break over Christmas. We're recording this in November. I don't know when this is going to go out. And then a big brand project in the new year, and then maybe some time off after that.
I think the 3 weeks in the Caribbean, I think, should be coming up in February. That's for sure. Yeah, so thank you so much. I'm glad we got to speak semi in person through the medium of digital connection. Thanks so much for coming on the show. It's been a pleasure to have you. And yeah, I look forward to speaking to you soon again.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. And you keep writing those books, because I won't.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Creativity for Sale podcast. The show was produced and presented by me, Radim Malinic. Editing and audio production was masterfully done by Neil Mackay from 7 Million Bikes Podcasts. Theme music was written and produced by Robert Summerfield. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to support the podcast, please subscribe and leave a rating or review. To get your own action plan on how to start and grow a life-changing creative business, you can get a copy of Creativity for Sale book via the links in show notes. As always, keep those creative fires burning, and until next time, I'm Radim Malinic, your guide through this exploration of passion, creativity, innovation, and the boundless potential within us all.